Think you know ChatGPT? Think again. Now, a lot has changed recently, and keeping up with all the reveals, tweets, webinars, and unannounced updates feels like trying to drink from a fire hose. Just a few days ago, they released powerful new search capabilities, brand new models like O3 and O3 Mini, plus they've hidden a bunch of features buried in the app and mobile versions that are pretty difficult to find. But thanks to all this, ChatGPT can now handle way more complex tasks faster than ever before. And today, you'll learn how to reclaim hours lost to manual research, break down and present complex data, and use ChatGPT to automate repetitive tasks so that you can spend more time on work that actually matters. So if you're ready to become a ChatGPT power user, let's dive in. So one big new feature that was kind of hidden in last week's big model announcement was how ChatGPT got a pretty big search upgrade. Gail, do you want to show us how this changes fundamentally what you can do in ChatGPT?
Yeah, so we have an example that you can see on my screen right now. And the example is basically putting the brand new model like O3, but this would also work with O4 Mini, as a corporate retreat planner. I basically wanted to find the ideal location. I pretend I have staff all around the world, people in Europe, like Edinburgh, in South Africa, Budapest, Zagreb, Cairo, Mumbai, Cebu, etc. It's very difficult when you do this kind of corporate retreats to find the exact right place to bring people in.
We've planned these before, and we basically had someone working on it part-time for like several months trying to pull all this together. So yeah,
exactly.
It's complicated.
And it takes lots of Googling and lots of searching, etc. And that's one thing that these new models can do is, as I'm going to show you in the reasoning, they can do many, many queries in one search for you and replace hours of Googling. So the constraint, just to go back to the example, was that I want a trip to feel luxurious, but I don't want to spend too much money, which is like most companies, basically. I want as little paperwork as possible, so like visas, etc. And I want to minimize jet lag and flights to optimize productivity. And then I ask it to find the exact hotel and to prepare the itineraries for each employee, as well as visa requirement, and also find when is a good time to have not too hot, not too cold weather, right? And so what happened is, like, before I show you the result, is that the model basically starts reasoning, and then within its reasoning, which is something that's new with the new models, it does web searches. So you can see it search for like a direct flight from Cebu to Dubai, Emirates duration, flights from Mumbai to Dubai, flights from Warsaw to Dubai. Like, it did all that stuff and picked essentially like some of the results and read what is there. And based on what it read, just was like, oh, I'm missing this information. Maybe I should search more for this, or maybe I need to kind of go deeper. It does that multiple times, as you can see. It's like it reads, it searches, it reads, it searches, the same way you would when you're essentially planning such a trip, except it does this in 3 minutes and you would do this in 3 days. All of this to come up to the conclusion that it found me the exact hotel in Dubai that I would admit feels quite nice, to be honest. I think I'd be happy to spend a holiday there. And it told me that it's basically quite a bit cheaper than the rest, because it's only between $106 and $218 per night compared to $350 for similar results in Dubai. So it took my constraint of like luxurious, but not too crazy, basically. It actually planned things that we can do. And essentially, like, it's like, oh, you have meeting rooms, you're close to the highway, etc., all that kind of stuff. It found that the best time to go is between late October and mid-April, because it's between 24 and 31 degrees. This was not required, but did it anyway. But most importantly, it did what I asked for, like all the attendees, which is like the route suggested, how long it takes with which airline, the actual time difference, and then the visa situation, basically. So that's pretty handy. And it gave me a budget snapshot depending on where people go and next step, and even some links to actually see how to go. So it's pretty smart. So for example, the fact that it has Visa here, which is definitely the cheapest way to go from Budapest to Dubai, it did a good job, actually. I would probably have done the same thing. So this is the kind of search that was impossible to do last week. It has all the references as well. You can click and get everything. And this is basically a replacement for most of my searches today.
This is a very similar task that we gave an events coordinator during our hiring process. And like the report that this is generated in 2.5 minutes is on par with anything that we got, when someone worked for half a day building that. So that's pretty impressive. I want to switch to some more, I guess, like day-to-day type work situations, though.
Okay.
And before the podcast, I sent you a few challenges. So I'm curious to see how you've gotten on with that. So the idea is that you need to showcase the advanced features of ChatGPT. Walk me through how you would do 3 tasks. So the first task I gave Gail was, I want you to pretend that you are an Ahrefs customer support person. So you work for the Ahrefs or SaaS company, and you need to draft a response to a customer support ticket that comes in asking a technical question about how to use the tool to export 300 different reports and merge them all together.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, first of all, the context was like, I'm a support person, so I'm more likely to do this quite often, right? And so one thing that I like to do is I like to pre-prompt things so that I don't have to prompt engineer every single thing I do. And at the same time, have good results every single time I query a chatbot without having to think too much on per query. So that's why I used the project feature. So you can see you have projects on your sidebar on ChatGPT. And if you click on the plus button, you essentially add new ones. Projects are a way to group your chats together. It still has access to all the features in ChatGPT. So you can see you have search, you have all of that, etc. And you can select the models. We'll talk about models in a second. So what I've done is I've actually prepared some instructions that are pretty basic, basically, which says, you're an Ahrefs support agent, a bot, give accurate, friendly, concise answers to Ahrefs customer. And then I tell it, read the documentation that's provided to you, which I'm going to explain in a second. And then here's an example of output format, be polite, that kind of stuff. Essentially, all the stuff that you tell a chatbot to do every single time you want a support answer. Now, this was a limited scope of a task, so I only gave it 2 files that are related to the question that you sent me, that I just essentially extracted from the Ahrefs website. And
what are in these files? Sorry.
I don't know if I can click it. I can't click it, but it's basically like the documentation from the Ahrefs website on reports. I just copy pasted into a text file and I gave it that. If I was a real support agent, I would probably have like 30, 40, 50 files in there with more data. And all I have to do now is I'm just saying, reply to this support ticket, and I triggered the canvas function. I'm going to run this. We're going to use the 4.0 model for this one, which is the default in ChatGPT.
We will talk about all these different models because that was a big part of the update last week and confused a lot of people. But yeah, we'll get to that later.
So the canvas function, what it does is it actually is going to be using like this little thing that I can expand. And so now I have like a text editor that I can work on with the AI, right? So let's say this is a pretty long answer. This is okay, but it's pretty long, for example, right? So what you can do is like, let's say you don't like a section. You're like, oh, this could be a bit shorter. You can actually select an area and say, make this shorter, for example, if you don't like the answer. And what it's going to do is...
Feels kind of like commenting on a Google Doc and then getting the fix straight away.
And then boom, you can see it just made it slightly shorter. So I get to converse with my chatbot. I can either talk on the left for like global changes to the document, or I can talk in line with essentially that. And I actually have like some formatting options as well. If I want, like I can actually make some proper formatting. But the point is chatbot has access to the documentation. So the answer should be mostly right. Like it talks about batch analysis. There's a list of up to like, you put your 300 URL, etc. So it has the knowledge. It answered in the tone I gave it in the prompt. And now I can work with it to get my final answer. And when I'm done, I would just copy it, paste it to my support ticket, and essentially have the answer. So that's how I would use
it's even come up with a limitation in that tip at the end that what it cannot do, which is kind of why I submitted the question this way. But that's interesting. Yeah.
So the documentation might be incomplete in what I gave it, but that's how I would do the workflow. If you have repetitive answers you need to give to people, etc., it's highly recommended to set a project, put some knowledge, and then use the canvas if you actually want to have some control on the answer. It's just much nicer to work on. And if you want to just type as well, you can, right? It's like I can just take over and just add a sentence if it makes more sense, basically.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good example of like a text-based query, and probably a lot of people have used ChatGPT for similar-ish things, but maybe not using all of these features here. The second challenge I gave you was a little bit more difficult because we're talking about images here, and I asked you how you could use ChatGPT to give me title and thumbnail suggestions for a YouTube video.
Yep. So again, I made a project here. And I basically told ChatGPT that it's a channel analyst. His mission is to generate 5 high-impact title and thumbnail concept for a new video I have. And then the thing that I wanted to do as well is I wanted to use the new features. You see how I showed you search in the search thing? I wanted to actually research content on the same topic as my video that is performing well, so it gets inspiration for what to write as a title. And for the thumbnail, it's a bit more difficult because the search, I don't think it views the images, but at least for the titles, I should get better response. And that's why here in my project, I'm selecting O4 Mini High as a model. The reason why is because it has this iterative search that we saw at the beginning. So O3 and O4 Mini High in projects have it. O4 Mini has it as well, but I can't use it in projects for some reason. And so what I did is because I pre-prompted everything, it has no files, but it says, prepare the YouTube packaging. It knows what I'm talking about because my instructions are already pre-written here, right? So I don't really have to prompt. And I just gave it the transcript. And this is our podcast on deep search, right? And so what it's going to do is it's going to read the transcript, understand what it's about, research content about deep search. Like you can see,
and it's researching that by going to YouTube.
Well,
what do you
it's
mean?
probably going to be using Bing, because Bing is what's used as a search engine under the hood for ChatGPT. And then it's going to still see the snippets. And then in the snippets, there is view numbers. So it sees the title, it sees view numbers, and that's how he does it. So you can see now it's like searching site, YouTube, AI, deep search, research business. It's getting basically a SERP with a bunch of YouTube video because of site column YouTube. And then it's like actually going to start seeing what's ranking on Bing and the titles they have and how many views they have. And it should allow it to essentially come up with something. Now, I ran this before, so maybe I'll show you the answer.
Sure.
Or should we let it run? Oh, no, here you go. It actually did it. I did all these searches, and it gave me 7 AI deep research hacks that explodes your business growth. Not too bad. Beat competitor, AI deep research secrets revealed. Background checked in minutes. Yeah, because we talked about that in the podcast. Supercharged cold emails with AI-powered deep search. We talked about that too. You could argue it's not the whole podcast, but it's not too bad, you know?
Usually what happens with having been through this process manually and using AI a number of times now, you never get the right answer straight away.
Yeah, you would prompt, you would iterate.
A bunch of people in the room, but you sometimes get like, oh, I like that word or I like that structure for a title, and then you kind of build and iterate.
Yeah, exactly. So let's imagine we want to do the third one. If I wanted to generate a concept for the thumbnail, right? Let's say I'm like, okay, what does this look like? I'll probably switch back to another model, 4o, which is the one that can generate images. And to be frank, you could generate images with the other ones, but it's like the native one. I would turn search off, and I'd be like, write a brief for thumbnail number 3. And the point is, I just have a one-liner for the thumbnail here, like a silhouette under an AI radar with a green check mark, which is not enough details to generate an image. So I'm having AI brainstorm what it's going to look like, which is a lot more clear now that it's written that. And now I could be like, generate a 16:9, because it really fucks up the aspect ratio quite often. Thumbnail following this brief. And now normally it should generate the image within the same thing. And because I'm on the right model, like you can see it start generating. I don't know what I'm going to get on the other side. Like this is a live example, but you get the idea of the workflow, right? You just essentially use O4 Mini to do that research, iterative research, get you some data, and then you kind of switch back to maybe a more creative model or image generating model. You prepare the brief, like you give context for what the task is going to be through AI. Maybe you go back and forth if you're doing it yourself. And now you can see that we're getting some kind of thumbnail done. Again, I would probably not use this thumbnail. So like the way we actually do this ourselves, so I'll show you a real example. That's an example of a AI-generated thumbnail that I've been doing for us for last week's podcast that had like 10 photos of you. But because the faces are not perfect.
Doesn't quite look like me, does it?
Nah. Exactly. So what we do is we generate prototypes, and then we just go on Canva and we make another version of the same thing. So essentially, I got this concept, which I was like, it's pretty good. And we did this in like 10 minutes, because once you know exactly what to do, you can look at the image from ChatGPT. It's pretty quick and easy to do something similar. So that's my workflow. For that, I would make this project. I would generate some concepts. Like, I'm not sure that's the best thumbnail, but you know, I could have walked back and forth with it. And then I would go in Canva and build something similar. And that's production ready. Actually, this thumbnail won. We had 3 thumbnails against each other, and this one won the A/B test. So ChatGPT came up with a better concept than me for last week's podcast.
And I think that's the point. Like, you don't have to use everything that ChatGPT gives you straight out the bat. Like, you can use that as inspiration and then go and iterate on that yourself and build something that's really good. Yep. So, I mean, that's a really good example using images in ChatGPT, which we did a podcast on last month as well. It's quite interesting. The third example I gave you was I wanted to do some pretty complex data analysis, but have like a quantitative and a qualitative side to this challenge. So it was to analyze a Facebook ads campaign from a product launch and make recommendations for which ads and ad copy to use again in future and what to test next.
Yeah, okay, so I grabbed the CSV, which I uploaded on ChatGPT. So when you upload the CSV, you actually get kind of like a table like this,
which
is
just
nice.
The CSV we downloaded from Facebook ads showing the like ad performance, the report.
Exactly. Anywhere where you have data that you can export as CSV, like import it in ChatGPT. And basically, again, this is not even a project. There's no pre-prompt in this. This is default ChatGPT. I selected the O4 Mini model mostly because the reasoning models, which we're going to talk about, like the O3 or 4s, they are good at math. Whereas anything that has numbers, like if you don't use these two, they will probably get the math wrong. And since this is a CSV with like spending numbers, etc., it needs to add up and so on. If I selected another model, it would probably not do a good job in the analysis. So that's why I selected O4 Mini here. And then I said, these are my ad copies from a recent launch. Help me identify what works and what doesn't for my future creatives. Pretty broad, high-level query. So again, it reasoned for 30 seconds, and you know how it can do iterative searches? It can also do iterative analysis. So you can see like it analyzes some stuff, then some other stuff. It does that multiple times until it comes up with its answer here. And essentially it gives me back a CSV that I can download if I want. There's a download button with like best to worst creative. So it's like if we wanted to see what's working best, these are the best headlines basically, and these are the best copies. And it gives me the stats for each one, which is okay. But most importantly, after that, it kind of like looks at the entire data set overall and tells me, okay, what's working, what's not working. And it's like you get urgency and emotion, brackets in headlines, like the closing thing in the headlines worked really well, and a clear call to action like upgrade or don't miss out.
This is so powerful, the idea that you can pull what's working from just a big set of data. We've been using this a lot recently to analyze competitors and analyze other people's social media, and the insights you get out from it, they're so powerful.
Yep, and then if you use like scraping tools like Apify to build your data set and so on, then you can really do some cool stuff and make some data-driven decision very easily without being a number person, which like a lot of people are not. But anyway, basically this gives me kind of like high-level guidelines on what to do for my next launch. Very, very handy. Again, it even gave me recommendations for future creatives. So like, you know, front-load attention-grabbing emojis, but ensure the copy quickly follows. Like it just gives me a bunch of stuff. It's pretty cool. And again, this is the weakest reasoning model here. Like we're talking, this is the least good one. The best one was used for the corporate planning, which was like, I would say a little bit of a level above. So that's kind of like how we tackle these tasks. And you can see for each one, we kind of like don't just simply prompt, but we rather use the tooling available in ChatGPT. And there's a lot of it available. We'll talk about the rest, but yeah, there's more to do.
Okay, so there is a lot to unpack in those four examples. You've used a ton of features, some of which I've never heard of before. So let's go through them all one by one and let's break it down how to use them. And I want to start by talking about the different paid plans. So there is a ton of features you've gone through in these four examples, some of which are new to me. And I'm sure a lot of people are keen to learn how to use each of these features and where to find them, because sometimes they don't make it so easy. But I want to start by talking about the different paid plans on ChatGPT, because there's even like a lot you could do with a free model. But first, before we get to that, I want to have a quick word from our sponsor today, which is Deadline Funnel. Are you tired of running promotions where nobody takes action until the very last minute? Or worse, using those fake countdown timers that reset when somebody refreshes the page, destroying your credibility? That's why at Authority Hacker, we've used Deadline Funnel for over 10 years to power our offers and generate tens of millions of dollars in course sales. This powerful tool creates authentic, personalized deadlines for each of your subscribers that actually expire when they're supposed to. Now, what makes Deadline Funnel special is how it tracks your audience across devices using cookies, IP addresses, and email tracking. When someone's deadline expires, they're automatically redirected to an offer expired page. No exceptions, no cheats. So your subscribers quickly learn that when you say an offer ends on Friday, you genuinely mean it. And we've seen incredible results using their evergreen campaigns for new subscriber discounts. Each new subscriber gets their own personalized window to take advantage of special pricing. And this creates genuine urgency without us having to manually run promotions or launches every week. This tool integrates seamlessly with all major email platforms and website builders. You can display beautiful countdown timers on your website, in floating bars, and even directly in your emails. All of these are then synchronized to show the exact same deadline to each person. Deadline Funnel starts at just $49 per month, and they're currently offering double-length 30-day free trials to Authority Hacker listeners. So you can experience how real urgency lifts your conversions without the technical headaches. Thanks again to Deadline Funnel for sponsoring this episode. So Gil, talk to me about the different plans on ChatGPT. We're currently using the $20 a month plus plan.
Yeah,
that seems to be the sweet spot. Is that right?
I would agree with that. So like you can see I have the little icon, it says plus. There's basically 3 plans. There's the free plan, the one that you just create an account and you have access. The plus plan, which is $20 per month. And the pro plan, which is $200 per month. So like we're jumping significantly. And they all come with basically various usage limits. So if you're on a free account, you don't have access to everything. Like this model drop down here does not exist on the free account. You just have reasoning. And what that means is that by default, you get this model called GPT-4o, which we're going to talk in a second. And then if you click on the reasoning button, you get the O4 mini model. And if you use this one too much, you basically downgrade to the mini version of it that is less smart. That's pretty much the free plan for you. You don't have deep
pretty
search.
Good for free.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to gain market share, right? It's like their goal is that everyone uses ChatGPT. And so there has to be something decent that is offered. Now, the plus plan gives you access to everything. You just have limits on things, like more limits than the $200 plan, but every single feature except for one model called O1 Pro, which we might not go through our list, but is not available. But like apart from that, you have access to every single model with various limits. The smarter the model, the lower the limits, right? The best one, you only get 50 uses per week. The weakest ones, you get unlimited use, basically. All the tools, the canvas that I showed you, deep search, the data analysis, the graphing as well. Like I didn't show you, but you can visualize data in ChatGPT as well. You can see like I have all these graphs that I've generated from CSV and so on. All of that is available in the plus plan. So it's kind of the sweet spot for like the pro use without spending too much money.
Just quickly, of the 4 examples you showed at the start of the podcast, which of those things can you not do without one of the paid plans?
You can do pretty much all of it, but in very limited quantities. The reasoning models, you might have like 5 queries a day or something, I'm not too sure. But you can do that iterative search still. If you press the reasoning button and the search button, I tried this morning on a free account, and I was able to do this kind of deep research like we did earlier using that. You can do most things, but you'll run it 3 times a day, and then they'll be telling you upgrade or you don't have access.
Okay, and what about the $200 a month pro plan? Who's using that?
Again, if you want like unlimited access to the best models, like this O3 model is the best model at this point, you will upgrade to that plan. And that's going to give you, for example, the deep research, which we've mentioned in another podcast. You can see I have like 9 available until May 1st. Actually, I should use it more. But like you only have 10 per month on the plus plan. I think you have 2 or something on the free plan, and you have 100 on the pro plan, for example. So if you wanted to use this a lot, it's very good for like researching content, for example, then you would consider upgrading to the pro plan. But my argument is that the pro plan is a little bit overpriced, and unless you're really spamming ChatGPT all day, you're better off just paying for APIs and use something like Typing Mind, for example, which is what I do. Yeah. So like ChatGPT is kind of like my mobile chat. You know, on the desktop app, there's a shortcut that allows you to summon it from anywhere. If I have a quick AI query, I'll use that. For real kind of like copywriting work or that kind of stuff, I tend to move to Typing Mind, not pay $200 for ChatGPT.
Yeah. Now, in all of these examples, you talked about different models. And this was one of the things that really kind of like got to me last week when they made the announcement of the 3 new models, which were O3, O4 Mini, and O4 Mini High.
Yeah.
Is the naming convention, right? Because we already have GPT-4o. Now we've got O Mini and O4 Mini High. Like, can you just kind of talk us through the mental model in your mind when you're doing those different types of tasks? Like, how are you deciding which model to use for different types of tasks?
Okay, before I explain everything, I'm going to oversimplify everything to just give you a framework. It's not one-to-one. But basically, there's 2 categories of models. There's the non-reasoning models, which are like 4.0, 4.5, 4.0 Mini.
The number.
Yes, exactly. They basically don't think before they give you an answer. They tend to be more creative, but they suck at kind of like more complex data or more complex queries, right? It's like they're not super smart. Whereas the ones that start with O, so O4 Mini and O3, which are the ones that are available right now in ChatGPT, they are reasoning models, so they have this little reason thought for 20 seconds. So you can see, for example, here on my screen for the data analysis, I use O4 Mini and it has this reasoning. They are better at things like complex queries and so on, but maybe not as good at creative writing and so on. And that's in the example for the YouTube thumbnail, right? I started with a thinking model for the analysis. It did all this research, and I switched to 4.0 because it's more creative for brainstorming the brief for the thumbnail, for example, and to actually create the image, because I'm using the strengths of each model. So that's how you want to think about it. Then within each category, you basically have from bad to average to best. So like the worst non-thinking model is 4.0 Mini, then you jump to 4.0 and then to 4.5. roughly that's how it works. My recommendation would be start with like the mid ground. So I tend to put 4.0 as a basic non-reasoning model, for example. If it's not good enough and I want something more creative, then I would upgrade to 4.5 because I'm limited to like 50 queries a week or a month. I can't remember. It's not a lot for 4.5. Same for the reasoning models, right? It's like I would start with O4 mini, which like I'm in a project now, so you don't see it. But if I go on a normal thing, I would start here and maybe trigger search for a reasoning model. And then if it's not good enough, so for example, on this one, I used the O4 mini and I was trying to export my emails from my Gmail inbox. Classic thing. Answer is like average, it's not so good. Let's say I don't think it did a deep enough work. So I can actually click on this little pen here and I can actually change the model here. So I would go to the next model, which is O4 mini high, and I would click send again. And then the query goes again through that better model. Basically, that's kind of the workflow. You start with the base model, so 4.0 or O4 mini, and then you kind of upgrade if the answer is not satisfactory to you. That's pretty much all you need to know at this point.
So there are a number of tools that you can use to kind of like enhance what ChatGPT can do. One of them is the search functionality, which you click there in that example. Can you just explain exactly what's happening there when you check that button and when someone should think about pressing that?
So normally ChatGPT should pick the tools it needs when it needs them automatically. So I shouldn't have to click on the search. Okay, so you can see I clicked on the search button here. Normally I shouldn't have to. If ChatGPT thinks it needs search, it will trigger it automatically, but I can kind of force it to do that, right? And answers grounded in search tend to always be better than answers not grounded in search and just using the LLM's knowledge. So I tend to trigger it very often. And same with Canvas. You can essentially tell it make a canvas, and that gives you kind of like the interface that we saw for the Ahrefs support ticket where we can edit together, etc. So you have access to these tools and you can tell ChatGPT use them, but it will use them anyway if it thinks it needs them. And that's kind of a tricky one because you remember how I told you you only have 10 deep searches per month? Sometimes if you ask a very deep query, it will trigger deep search on its own and use one of your credits.
Okay.
It happened to me like twice. So yeah, be a little bit careful on that. That's the automatic tool call. That's
at least they tell you how many you've got left. I saw when you over deep research.
They used to not to.
That's helpful.
Yeah, but there's more tools actually. It's not so obvious, but if you want to create an image, there should be a button here, but there isn't. So you should say create an image and it will create an image because it would be too easy otherwise. You know, create a meme that will make me laugh. And then if I say that, it might just write. So I'll say image, for example. And if I do that, now it's going to put it on the thinking model, which will still work. The point is that you can trigger the image tool by just talking about it. And you can actually do that in your prompts as well. You can prompt a tool and it will generate an image. So that's pretty much tools in ChatGPT. And that's one of the reasons why I use projects over custom GPTs. So people know about custom GPT in these Explore GPTs here. And the reason I recommend projects is because you actually have access to all the tools, all the memories and everything in there. And so as a result, it's a better workbench than the custom GPTs.
Okay, and there's also the deep research functionality, which we did a full podcast on 2 weeks ago. But if anyone hasn't listened to that, how exactly is deep research different from just search, or indeed different from any of the reasoning that you showed us in the earlier examples?
Okay, let's go back to our corporate research example, because now the blend between deep research and search it's a lot more confusing than it used to be, because before an LLM would do like a single search, read a single set of results, and then it could reason or not reason, but it would just give you the answer. Whereas essentially the new models, O3 and O4 mini, will do exactly the same thing as what deep research does, which is, think about your query, do some searches, read the results, think more about how to get closer to the result and do that. So deep research is basically a long version of this. It will do this for like 20 to 30 minutes. It will give you a much deeper report. You might get like a 5,000 word report at the end. But to be frank, I would call O3 and O4 mini deep research, basically.
Just to add to the confusing naming convention here. Okay.
Exactly, because they do exactly the same thing now. And it's so good because, again, deep research, 10 queries per month, O4 mini, 150 per day, right? That's a whole different ballgame. Even O3 is 50 per week, right? So it's a lot less needed now that you have this, because you have this intermediary step. Simple search, you'll do it with O4. Mini deep research, you do with O4 mini and O3. And then real deep research, you do pressing the button.
Given the credit anxiety that you're likely to have with only 10 of those per month, I imagine most people would probably run the query through one of the O models first, just to see if what they get is good enough before risking the deep research. Yeah,
that's how you
are you mostly thinking about using that for like when you're writing an article or planning to write a blog post or something? Or what
Yeah.
other use cases would
I
you
mean,
for that?
content planning, even for like podcasts, etc. I kind of run deep research on like some of the subtopics that we're going to talk about, and it just gives me ideas of things to do. It doesn't mean I use what I one for one, but it just gives me ideas when I outline. Again, like this corporate trip, you could argue this could have been a deep research. It might be worse. If you're really going to spend like tens of thousands of dollars into a corporate trip, you might as well use 1 credit of deep research. I think it's worth the price. Yeah. Like a broad problem you have, right? So for example, one thing that I was exploring recently is, okay, how do we do more shorts with the podcast? I could come to deep research and be like, this is my problem. I have this podcast. It's not super easy to cut into shorts. I don't have much time. I'm not a video editor. Find me a way to do this. And then deep research will come up with like multiple ways to do this, and you can pick the one you want, potentially run some O4 mini or O3 searches as a follow-up. And then you come with broader problems, basically. Think about the problems you have rather than the search queries you need to type. And that's how these tools are evolving.
You've talked about memory in ChatGPT, and I've seen this come up many times, very updated when I enter a query. Can you just explain to everyone what exactly is going on with this memory stuff? Like, how do we use it? And is it just like an automatic thing that happens, or what's going on here?
Yeah, so it was recently updated, actually. To show you how you manage it, you click on your profile photo, which is going to be on the top right on the website, bottom left on mobile, and you click on settings, and then you have a memory option in personalization. So here you can actually reference save memories, and you can give custom instructions. And what it is basically ChatGPT takes notes on you as you're talking. I'm not going to open it because I don't want personal stuff to show up. But like if you click on this, you will see all the notes that ChatGPT has taken about you as you're talking to it. They actually upgraded it like 2 weeks ago, where now any chat on ChatGPT can reference anything you've said in any chat. It should know you quite well, and it's quite handy. For example, it knows we were an authority hacker, it knows what our goals are, it knows about our repositioning to AI and automation. And it's like when I type a new query, when I make a new chat and I type, it knows all that stuff already. I don't have to put this in my prompt. Kind of like, it makes me want to use ChatGPT more, you know?
This is one of the big benefits to like using ChatGPT. It remembers all this stuff, so you don't have to kind of like explain who you are every time. And a really good way that you showed me a couple months ago now to test this out is if you ask it to roast you, like,
oh God, you want me to do this live?
No, let's not go there. It really like gets some interesting stuff there from what you type. So it's clearly building up like a lot of good knowledge about who you are and what you do. There is, I believe, though, a way to kind of prune that. If, you know, your mom's asking you to come up with a bunch of flower arrangements in ChatGPT that, you know, maybe it's going to think you're a flower arranger now. So like people should go and check out their memory. And
there's actually one trick here. You see this temporary button here? It's a little bit like incognito window on your browser. If you click here, this is not going to use memory. So if you want vanilla ChatGPT, click on the temporary button, and then you will get a more generic answer that is not based on you, actually. Another thing as well is in the options, if you go into customize ChatGPT, you can actually do multiple things. You can say who you are, what you do, and then you can give it a system prompt that essentially influences the tone of ChatGPT. So you see mine is basically provide accurate answers grounded in the best available evidence. For example, I'm not interested in random theories or something like this. It's like style and tone, light humor. I actually tell it to reference past chats and make kind of like banter in it as well to make it a bit more fun. And then also I tell it to reason its answers. So again, that's kind of like a prompting trick to make the non-reasoning models a little bit smarter and make reasoning models reason a little bit more. I just get a bunch of these, and then that changes the way it works. And here you can actually write a bunch of info you want it to know. In advance, you can change the tools you want it to access. I recommend you keep everything on. And then if you tick enable for new chats, it's basically within the context every single time you start a new chat, basically.
And I think this could be quite good if you feel like the wording of ChatGPT responses is quite generic or, you know, mundane, and you want it in a certain style. That can be quite helpful.
Yeah, this is why even like the report on the corporate retreat doesn't sound corporate. It sounds more friendly than corporate in the way it writes, because it understands the underlying tone that I ask it to write in. That's just the way I prefer writing and working in general. But like if you wanted to have like a very corporate-y type answer and like it mattered to you for your work and that made things easier, you could absolutely do that. You can influence the entire output of ChatGPT within these options.
Is this essentially acting as a system prompt for the whole app? Okay.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay, let's talk now about projects, because you did some pretty cool stuff with that in the examples. And I think that there's a lot of interesting use cases for this. First, though, I want to have another quick word from one of our sponsors today, which is Thrivecart. At Authority Hacker, we've processed tens of millions of dollars in sales through Thrivecart since 2018. And their new Pro Plus tier has us genuinely excited about what's possible for digital product sellers. Their latest update introduces multiple order bumps that stack complimentary offers at checkout, which can increase your average order value by between 10 and 30%. And their new tax-inclusive pricing option shows customers the final price upfront, helping to reduce cart abandonment. But what sets Thrivecart apart are their practical innovations like checkout QR codes for in-person sales, advanced UTM tracking for marketing attribution, and even crypto payments options through USDC that are very exciting. Their platform is designed with conversion in mind, offering customizable checkout templates and A/B testing capabilities that let you optimize every element of your sales process. Everything integrates seamlessly with major teaching, email, and payment platforms. And after evaluating all available options, we've stuck with them for over 7 years now because they simply deliver the best results. So check out thrivecart.com today to get the best shopping cart experience for digital sellers. And thanks again to Thrivecart for sponsoring this episode. So Gail, what can we do with projects?
Okay, so projects are like a better version of GPTs.
Whoa, what are GPTs?
GPTs are basically like a way to personalize an instance of ChatGPT where you give it custom instructions, custom files that you can reference when you talk with it. Custom GPTs are shareable, projects are not shareable. It's also a way to organize your ChatGPT. So I'm still not that organized on my ChatGPT, to be honest. I have a long list of chats on the left, but you can see that, for example, the YouTube specialist chat puts all the chats under the folder. So if you wanted to organize things, it's pretty handy. And when you open a project, you can see all the past chats with that folder inside a single page, which makes it nice to refer and stay organized, basically. Now, I explained you can put custom instructions here, which acts as like a system prompt. You should know as well that projects have access to all the instructions that you've also put in customized ChatGPT. And it has access to all your memories as well. It's basically normal ChatGPT, except you can give additional instructions and you can upload files so that it can reference to them. I have none here, but like on the Ahrefs one, you can see I have 2 project files, right?
So essentially, it's just giving extra importance to these project instructions and the files that you've uploaded.
Yeah. For some reason, you can still select the model as well, which you cannot do in custom GPTs, which is why I would not recommend it, because you're stuck with 4.0, which is not as good as the new ones. For some reason, you can't use 0.4 mini. I don't know why. It just doesn't work. So you need to use 0.4 mini high, which is only 50 per day. I mean, it's still fine, but 4 is also okay for like support tickets, etc. But you can select your model if you want, and then everything is organized there. And then it's a simpler way to keep things organized while still having access to all the tools and all custom instructions.
So these are not agents. Agents are something else. Is that right?
I would call an agent like an AI that actually takes action for you, like does something.
Okay.
Whereas this is, you could argue writing a response is doing something, more like interacting with another app, sending an email, adding something to your calendar, etc. That's what I would call an agent. But historically, people have called agents these kind of chatbots. It's just that the definition, the goalpost has moved a little bit because now it's pretty easy to make AI that does things. And that's coming to ChatGPT. They're bringing MCP to ChatGPT. So you'll be able to do things to your apps using ChatGPT, hopefully very soon.
And if they do, then we'll be sure to make a podcast on it. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that one. One of the things that I found really frustrating when images came out was trying to highlight an area of the image, edit it, and to give instructions on it. Figured quite quick, after about an hour of trying to get this to come up, that it just wasn't available in the ChatGPT app at the time. And apparently there's a lot of differences between the website, the ChatGPT desktop app, and the mobile app. So can you tell us what are some gotcha moments there that we need to watch out for?
Yeah, so I'm on the chat that I showed with the YouTube thumbnail. So first of all, I want to show the in-paint function. So basically, you could click on an image, and then you have this little select tool here, and you can paint on stuff. So like I could paint on your face. I could be like, make it more like the photos, for example. I don't know what I'm going to get, but I could do that.
Basically, instead of typing in, hey, on the face, which is at the top left of the image you just generated, do this. You just highlight it quickly.
Exactly. And more importantly, you give more precise instructions to the model because on the face could be quite broad and misinterpreted. Whereas when you actually put a perimeter that it needs to work within, it should do a better job, basically.
Got a good example of this when I asked it to do something with a ladder, which was in the background of a photo, but it mistook the panes on one of the doors for the cross-section of the ladder. Yep. So that's why I needed to find this tool.
So this is what it does. I'll let it generate. We'll maybe check it after. Now, the desktop app has more functions. So you can see, for example, you have this little icon here on the desktop app. This icon allows you to put an app that you have open in context when you're chatting with ChatGPT. For example, I could click on the add button here, and now I actually have access to podcast notes as I'm typing. And I could say, read the podcast notes and then answer the question or help me come up with more ideas of things to talk about on the podcast or that kind of stuff.
Looking on your computer at which apps you're currently running, and if any of those are compatible, it will let you select them, and it pulls in text data from the current view, like, or is it just that one page in Notion thing?
It's whatever is opened. Think about it like screencasting, like I'm doing now.
Okay.
It doesn't work with every app, so you cannot cast your browser, for example. It only works with mostly text and coding apps. So you can see we have Windsurf here, we have Cursor, we have like the Notes app, the Terminal. So like if you're not a developer, it's not as useful. It's mostly to look at your code and be like, hey, it's not working. How do I fix this? And it will just basically help you. And you can even have it right on the app, actually. There's an option that you can trigger. So it will go to Notion, for example, and start adding the ideas itself, basically. So you kind of extend it and take it a bit further. So that's one option that is on the desktop that is not on the website. Another,
and that's important there, because if you're using Notion, for example, you need to download the desktop version of Notion, or if you're using it in Chrome.
Exactly. Now, there's another button here, which you're not going to see what it does. But really what it does is it puts this window on top, like floating on my desktop above every other window. So I can keep like a permanent chatbot while I'm working on something else and chat with ChatGPT. And so that's also pretty handy if you're like debugging something, working on like NA10 or something.
Do you mean it brings it to the front of all your windows?
Yes, it never goes to the back.
It doesn't.
Yeah,
got it.
It's always in front. You put it on the side, for example, you click around, you do all your stuff, and you always have a chatbot that's here that you can quickly interact with.
It's the button at the top right of the desktop app.
That's the one here,
right? Okay.
Yeah. And then you can actually summon this mini floating chatbot using a keyboard shortcut. So if you go onto the settings, you can see I'm on the settings on the desktop app. You can actually set a keyboard shortcut here. This allows you to summon ChatGPT wherever you are with a floating window on top. And then you can use this kind of like O4 mini high deep research with it, for example. So this is kind of like my default way of searching for stuff right now. It's like I press Option space, I click on the search button, and then I type what I want, and I have essentially an AI agent that does mini deep search for me for whatever query I have and gives me the answer floating on top of whatever I'm doing. So whenever I'm trying to figure something out, building on Windsurf, on NA10, that kind of stuff, or prompting or whatever, and I need some information, like how does this API work, or what is the function in this app to do this, essentially that's my Google replacement. It's what I showed you with the corporate retreat research, mixed with the desktop apps that allows me to summon this in literally one click.
I think this is one of the reasons why Google search is actually in trouble, because this is getting not only so powerful, but so easy to access because ChatGPT's got the distribution now.
No, honestly, I am so surprised that Google has not done this in Chrome, because they could totally build a shortcut in Chrome. It would just be like desktop-wise, and it would make like a little Chrome window that floats and you can bring back to your main Chrome, for example. But I think they don't do that because they're afraid of the antitrust stuff, and that essentially would give them incredible distribution. And they almost want some level of competition, because otherwise they might be broken up.
One hand tied behind their back when they're fighting this battle.
Yeah, I'm telling you, because it doesn't make sense. It's the best way to use AI right now, is this little floating window, this like iterative search with reasoning models, with O4 mini with 150 per day. And then like you never leave what you're doing. You stay in context. You don't open a new tab to search, basically.
Okay, so speaking about making ChatGPT easier to use, one of the cool features is the ability to use voice to interact with it. So there's a couple different options there I saw. You can like record your voice, or you can just speak to it and like have a conversation with it. Do you use that much?
Not too much. I mean, not the voice mode anymore. By the way, this is your better face, apparently.
It's still a bit extreme.
It's better.
In terms of capturing the likeness of me,
it's not bad.
Better.
I might use it, actually. I might put it on as the thumbnail just to see if it does better, because it's actually not too far. I think your eyes are a bit too big, but other than that, it's not bad. Anyway, just to show the in-painting tool. The reason why is because you have the live voice mode, right? Let's make a new chat, though. If I click on this button, I get the voice mode. It actually prompts me, and then it just will talk to me. I'm not going to let it answer, but you get the point. You have this on mobile. The problem is this is probably one of the least smart models that you might get on AI. So while it's cool to talk to it and so on, it's nice for like very simple queries, but as soon as you do real work, written models are the way to go. But if you still want to use your voice, you can actually click on the dictate button. You could use O4 Mini, for example, and then you can just talk. And now it's going to record, basically. And then I'm going to click OK. And it's going to use this to write a text prompt that I can send to a text model, which is going to give me a better answer. Now, I use
It transcribes
ChatGPT.
what you said. You can use that text to do whatever you want.
I use ChatGPT voice, but I don't use it in the context you're looking at now. I use it on my phone. So if you have an iPhone that is less than 2 years old, you actually have a button here on the side called the action button. And this action button can be mapped to any action you want, right? And as everyone knows, Siri fucking sucks. So what you can do is you can I've set up an Apple shortcut. So I long press this button and it starts essentially ChatGPT voice immediately, and it will answer my questions.
So when you press the action button on your phone, that triggers the voice mode as opposed to transcribes the audio into a text mode.
And it's quite handy because on the phone, you can share your camera, for example. So let's say something's broken in my house. Like that's kind of like personal use or whatever. But I'll be like, hey, this is broken. How do I fix it? And it can still do simple web search. Like, oh, this is this model of this. It's frequent that it breaks. Most users report they fix it like this, for example. And it will just tell me like that. Also, when you visit a city, for example, I can just trigger it on and be like, hey, what is this? If you have your AirPods, basically you can have it like as a mini tour guide or something like that. Like,
if you're playing a game of, say, Scrabble, could you like say, hey, here are my tiles. What words can I make out of this?
You could potentially, but remember the voice mode model is like the dumbest model you can think of because it has to have low latency, so it cannot reason. And it needs to go fast, and so it gives you less good answers.
It's a little frustrating to work with because it's like sometimes it doesn't know when you're finished talking and it'll start to interrupt you, but then it's like a little bit of delay in that, and it still feels a little bit clunky to interact with.
If you did a Scrabble, I would just take a photo and send it to a text, for example. Like you'd get much better responses. And it's nicer than just having to talk to it or trigger your camera on or something like this. So,
and are you also using the Mac Whisper app to like input voice into ChatGPT in some way as well?
Not ChatGPT per se, but like for the vibe coding, I use Mac Whisper with like a prompt to prompt, basically, where I basically talk and it transforms what I say into a detailed prompt. And then I get better answers from AI without myself having to do the work of pre-prompting, But you could do that with ChatGPT if you wanted.
Okay. And one other cool feature that not a lot of people are doing because it's kind of annoying is you can actually rename the chats that you have in your history, right? So if you're working with like experimenting with a bunch of things, you can just like on the left menu, those 3 dots.
Yeah,
right,
and you can rename it.
Yeah. And, speaking of staying organized, one of the cool things you can do is, it sounds very simple, but you can rename your chats. So instead of having some, SEO life meme or exporting Gmail emails, you can rename it to something actually usable. And I find this really cool if you're experimenting with a bunch of things and you're trying to do something maybe 4 or 5 times. When you have the thing that works, you can rename that accordingly.
I'll go to bed early tonight. Also me at 3 a.m. checking Google Analytics like a maniac. Not too bad.
I mean, it's pretty good.
Made me laugh. It worked. Okay, but you can rename it.
And one of the other cool things you can do, because quite often you have a lot of images and a lot of different chats, is they've added a library function. So I can see you got 169 images there.
I actually tried to prepare this podcast and make some kind of family photos of all the models, but I thought it didn't make any sense.
That might work okay for like a social media image or something, not necessarily a thumbnail, but yeah.
That could work. And then you kind of like give this one does this, etc. I could see that. I could see people would like this actually. Lots of thumbnails practice as well. So this was like an A/B test. This one was a bit shit, for example, and just redone several times. But yeah, it's nice to be able to see all your prompts in one place. But yeah, you can see it's a lot of memes with friends as well. Like Trump crashes the stock market, but my friend says he wants to buy, therefore it goes back up. Logos, etc. Yeah, it's a cool way to kind of like find all your stuff. And now you have this kind of like create image button here, but it's really just a new chat. They're building these things fast, but then they're kind of like half-baked sometimes. I would say that's one of them.
So look, we use a lot of different AI tools day to day. We're big fans of Google Gemini. We've used Claude a lot for writing in the past. But now that you've seen everything that ChatGPT can do in April 2025, what are 3 things that you are still going to be using ChatGPT for, even though there are so many good other models out there?
Okay, so the first one is, as I said, the keyboard shortcut on a desktop app, combined with this kind of like mini deep search on a reasoning model on a floating app on your desktop. Like that's my go-to for any query I have. It's also my go-to on my phone. Like the ChatGPT app is by far the best mobile app that there is for AI tools. And so again, like I walk around and I have all these questions and I just throw them in there. It just goes and research while I'm walking or something. And I just reopen it like a minute later and it's just done like a bunch of deep research and I have like insightful stuff in there. So that's kind of like the main reason I use ChatGPT. The second one is images. It's the best image generator right now, I would say. But I think overall, if you're going to pay for one tool, and that's it, and you have $20 a month to spend on AI, not more, the value is incredible because you have model, like it's not writing as well as Claude, for example, but 4.5 is not that far. Even 4.0 is not super far. It's not the best reasoning model. I would say Google is still like, it's slightly better probably. A lot of people complain that there is hallucinations on the O3. So it's like, it's not the best, but it's like, it's very, very close second if it's not the best. And you still get access to that. You have the image generation, which is the best on the market. You have the best app. So it's kind of like a good all-rounder. It's like the iPhone, right? Yep. It's like the iPhone is not the best camera, but it's pretty good. It's not the best battery life, but it's pretty good. It's not the best screen, but it's pretty good. And it's kind of like all together
like
makes it
playing Mario in Super Mario Kart, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of like the best all-rounder, and I think that's their strength. They've lost their lead in models. They're not the best AI company in terms of making the best models anymore, I think. But it doesn't matter because they have by far the best product, and other companies don't seem very interested in catching up. Google's Gemini web app is not so good. Claude is not so good as well. What's missing here is just the MCP, so you can connect to external apps, and then that's going to make it like a really, really powerful app. And still my default kind of like AI question, basic usage app today, even though we have access to literally all of them.
And what would you say are three things that ChatGPT is still pretty bad at? And
one thing that it's pretty bad at is actually context size. If you're on a plus plan, you're limited to 32,000 tokens. A token is 0.75 words. So it's like if you wanted to summarize like very, very long documents, for example, ChatGPT is going to quickly lose the plot. That's kind of like how they justify only charging you $20 per month, because using the API for everything in the $20 plan would probably cost like $100 or $150 per month if you use everything.
They're really subsidizing it a lot, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the API cost is much higher than using ChatGPT. Another reason why I stay subscribed. It just reduces my API bills significantly by using this app. But the way they kind of make it work is by limiting how much memory essentially you have in your chat. And so when your chats get very long or when you upload large documents, that kind of stuff, it's going to start breaking apart. Whereas if you use the API, it's usually going to work just fine. Like, you know, Google has like 1 million token versus 32,000 on paid ChatGPT, for example. But they do the same on their web app, Google, right? It's only if you use the API and you pay the full price for the model that you get the full power. So I would argue these models are a little bit nerfed. In most cases, it's good enough. And the tool usage, especially with search, is so good that you cannot do with the API, like this kind of like, not the sources, sorry, but rather this reasoning with all the searches. It's like you would need to build your own agent to do this. This is not that easy to build. So it's really good value, in my opinion. The $20 is like, you know, it's kind of like Netflix at the beginning. It was like super cheap and you had like amazing TV shows. We are in this phase of AI right now. And trust me, it's going to unshitify itself over the next 10 years as they actually need to start making a profit. Because right now, the consumers are winning big time and getting a lot for very little money, actually.
Okay, Gael, anything else you wanted to touch on, or should we wrap it up there?
I think we can wrap it up. That was like a pretty deep dive into all the new stuff in ChatGPT. And I think, you know, there is lots of tools you could learn about, but the truth is 99% of people use ChatGPT to do things, and most of these people don't even know how to use it correctly. So before you jump onto super advanced tools and all that, learn how to use this. This is a very simple tool. Learn how to use this properly. You get much better results. You saw the example we gave. You saw the projects, the analysis, the data charting. You can do a lot already, and think about how you can use it in your daily life, and you'll realize how good this app is actually.
And if this episode was helpful to you, maybe you've learned something, then head on over to our YouTube channel and leave us a comment to let us know. Or if you have a use case for ChatGPT that we haven't covered here, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Other than that, we will see you next week for another episode of the podcast. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that one too.